where deeps the rocky highland of Sleuthwood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake. The drowsy water rats, they weave heed of fairies.
Welcome back, my lovely tribe. It's your girl, Michelle Jones here with another episode of Tribe of Many Nations. So today we're going to kind of kick it old school, and I want to talk about something in the paranormal realm. I know we haven't really hit on any paranormal topics probably since Halloween, really, if we're being honest. So I think it's time to just throw a monkey wrench in our normal get-togethers and talk about something paranormal or supernatural or whatever you want to call it, right? So I got this idea from one of my awesome coworkers, shout out to Devon, to do an episode on fairies, and not just any fairies, but the darker side of fairy mythology, right? So I started researching the subject. I literally just typed in dark side of fairy mythology on Google, and I found so much information to read and grasp that honestly I really didn't hit all of it. Like, there is so much information about fairy lore in mythology, in history, in different spiritual practices. It is outrageous how many different stories there are about fairies or fairy-like creatures. Now, I think the most commonly known type of fairy or fairy folklore, if you will, tends to come from Europe, specifically the Germanic, Slavic, British, French, and of course the Celtic region. The Celtic region, Ireland, and Scotland, I know they're probably not, are they both considered Celtic? That's a good question. I should probably have researched that before I started this video, but whatever. Those are probably the most well-known stories that I've heard of anyway about fairy lore, the Fae. So some cultures and stories would say that these fairies or the Fae were actual creatures that could come in and out of our reality, physical creatures, and then some would consider them more spiritual creatures, where they more like ethereal. They weren't necessarily physically in this realm. Before Christianity came into play with pagan beliefs, especially in the Celtic regions, the Fae and the Fairies were seen as capable of both good and evil, but were very mischievous creatures. And there are different physical descriptions of them, ranging from a ball of light to beautiful people with semi-pointed ears to terrifying creatures that don't even look like what most of us think of when we think of a fairy. They're fairy creatures, especially in the Celtic region, the descriptions are all over the place, right? But most of them tend to have some kind of human-like characteristics, which is what we're going to talk about first with the stories of the changelings. So the story of the changelings, there's so many different ones to pick from. I'm not going to pick like actual cases, but there's so many different stories about how people were sometimes murdered or tortured or something like that because their family members just knew that they had to be a changeling. And what a changeling is, or how a changeling comes to be rather, is basically when a fairy comes into our world and kidnaps one of our people, leaving behind either an enchanted something or other that looks like our person, or a fairy creature that's in disguise. So there were a ton of stories to sift through in the European folklore about fairies coming into our world, kidnapping babies specifically, and leaving behind fae babies who tended to have horrible attitudes, were very mean and angry children, or like with some stories about adult changelings, they would kidnap the adults and leave behind this person that had a complete personality wipe, almost like they were completely personality-less, if you know, like if that makes sense at all. So basically the person would act almost robotic, or else they would act like with a really horrible attitude just all of a sudden. And there are actually documented cases of people burning, poisoning, and harming and murdering their loved ones because they got it in their head that their loved one had been changed out with a fairy. And according to lore, if you boil them or whatever, then the fairies will come back and take the changeling and give you back your loved one. But 9 times out of 10, most of the stories I read anyway, they actually killed their loved one. So there's that. So what caught me right off the bat was in a lot of these stories, these myths, legends, folklore tales, they talk about protecting oneself against the fairies, wearing protective charms, different things like that, things to look for and avoid when it comes to fairies. And in modern thought, fairies have kind of become these like overly romanticized, happy, beautiful creatures. But like originally, back in folklore, they were something that you definitely wanted to avoid. Definitely avoid offending them, avoid being around them at all if necessary. They were very mischievous, they were very nefarious. And some of them are just downright evil, which we'll get into a few of them in a second, which by the way, I can't say any of their names. So get ready to read a lot of random names that Michelle can't say correctly. Okay, let's start breaking down some of these evil fairy creatures. First up, Leonhamshi. I don't know, guys. I honestly have no freaking clue how to say this name, so just read it. If you know how to say it, shoot me a video with like the appropriate way to say it. Alright? Supposedly this creature was first heard of, spoken of, whatever, on the Isle of Man. According to the inhabitants of the Isle of Man, this fairy-like creature was actually a little bit more vampiric in nature, feasting on blood, sucking people dry until they were literally like brittle, dried up corpses. And it usually tended to be a woman who was preying on a man, and she was like super sexy. We're seeing a theme here, we're seeing a correlation here with like a, what's the word here? Succubus? Yeah, with a succubus. Second one, Gonsiana? Yeah. This one is pretty much the reversal of the first one, but without all like the blood sucking. This is like a male fairy who was apparently like super Don Juanish and sexy and would practically have women falling onto him, obsessing over him, and falling in love with him. And apparently he seemed to really like to toy with women's emotions. He would get a woman to basically fall in love with him and then vanish. And then, according to mythology, the woman would eventually succumb and die of like a broken heart or whatever. That's pretty pathetic. Oh, okay. The next one looks like it says Badith I Mamau. Maybe. These fairies, fae, whatever you want to call them, were first spoken of in the Welsh area, right? And they are very well known for kidnapping babies. Seems like a lot of fairies are actually well known for kidnapping children and people, which is very disturbing. Like, first of all, where do they go? Do they ever come back? Do they want to come back? Do they go to a better place? Do they go to a worse place? Is it something you should be excited about or avoid? There are some stories of people who have supposedly come out of a fairy realm, and they are like the same age that they left this world in, but like time moves differently in the fairy realm. So maybe they spent like a year in the fairy realm. They come out and like their whole family has passed away of old age. These are just stories, mind you. These are just like myths and legends and folklore, but I find that really disturbing and terrifying. This one looks like it says Fakken. Fachin, Fakin. These are like my most interesting fairy species, if you will, because they're like monsters. They literally are described as these like hideous monster-like creatures that were supposedly so fearsome they could stop a man's heart if he saw them, or a woman's heart, or whatever. And on top of that, of course, it's not like they were sweet. They were evil, would beat people with like spiked clubs and chains. So, yeah. Least favorite so far. The next one, Slua? You know what? I should just stop. I should just stop right now. But this type of fairy, I don't know if that's actually the name for the fairy or if it's the name of the swarm of fairies, because these types of fairies travel in literally, they're called swarms. I don't know if they're large or small or whatever, but these swarms are supposedly composed of the souls of evil spirit, or like evil people who had died. So it was like these evil souls had died on Earth and they became these fairy-like, demony-like things that swarmed, and they only tended to come around at night. And there were different techniques to avoid them and keep them out of your home and all this mess. Supposedly they could be very sadistic too with torturing people. That's lovely. The next one I want to say is called Berberica. Berberica? I have no idea. No idea. Just read it. This type of fairy was actually interesting to read about because some of the descriptive features almost made me think of a mermaid. If, you know, like, I don't know. But apparently these fairies lived in like swamps and rivers and they would prey on fishermen. And there was like this really weird story that I read about how they would catch the fishermen. They would like suck up all the water in the river, and then the fishermen would be like, oh my gosh, all the fish, let's go get them. Then they would go and start capturing the fish, and then the Berberica would spew all the water back into the river and capsize their boats and drag them down into the river. That seems like a lot of work, but okay. And the last one we're going to talk about today, and there are plenty more, believe me, there are so many different types of dark, evil fairies out there, are the red caps. So this one was very interesting because first thing I thought of was gnomes, which I know that a lot of people correlate gnomes with fairies anyway, like they're a type of fairy or fae or whatever. Do I know? I don't know. I studied this material for one day, and there was enough material to last a lifetime. So I'm sorry if I got some of the names, obviously, and information wrong, but I just thought this was a really interesting topic. And if you're interested in fairies and the fae and the lore surrounding them, by all means, please educate us. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But anyway, these red caps, right? They are a Scottish tale, Scottish fae species, and they are very violent, very murderous little creatures with like sharp nails and claws. But the thing is, like, they didn't seem to really kill people with their nails and claws. They would kill people with like scythes. They would actually like hunt people down and kill them with scythes. They had like these tiny little, not tiny, but these scythes, like the Grim Reaper or something. And the reason they were called red caps is because supposedly, like, they literally had like the pointed gnome looking cap. Supposedly they would murder people and then sop up the human blood on their cap and then put their cap back on their head. So it was a red cap. Hot, hot, we get it. But I will never look at a little garden gnome with a red cap the same again. I'll never look at him the same again. It's very creepy, actually. It's very creepy and disturbing. But yeah, what you gonna do? Anyway, guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed a much shorter video. Other than that, guys, I love you all so much. Thank you guys for supporting my YouTube channel. Thank you guys for supporting Tribe of Many Nations, the business, for supporting my nonprofit animal rescue that I'm trying to get up and running. Thank you all so much for everything that you're doing to support me and just to make the world a better place. I love you all, and I will see y'all next week on the next video, which I have no idea what it will be about, but we're gonna have an adventure figuring that out. So I love you guys. I will see y'all next week. I hope you are having a fabulous week and getting some rest. Peace.
Come away, you human child, to the waters and the wild, with the fairy hand in hand, for the world's more